because my daughter at the age of 3 at nursery was asked to draw a picture of her family at home. And at that time, I was a single mom running my own business that was doing really well, but it meant I was leaving at 5 in the morning and getting back at 8 at night. She didn't even draw me in the house. She drew me in a car. She drew herself and her baby sister in the house. And that should have been a wake-up call for me, but I didn't know how else to be in the world. I was trying to survive. So I was on a track that was not of my own making, but I was doing what I thought I should do for them. Wow. So yeah, stop losing yourself in relationship with everyone else. Your clients, your friends, like your daughters. Claim your own ground. Take up a bit more space in the world.
Welcome to Modern Enlightenment, a sanctuary for your soul, where we'll go on a path of personal and spiritual development. I'm Austin Mao.
And I'm Chuchu Wang. We are your companions on this journey of self-discovery and spiritual connection.
Join us as we delve into the fusion of modern psychotherapy, neuroscience, psychospirituality, and shamanic plant sacrament ceremonies, exploring the transformative potential of psychedelics for the mind, body, and spirit.
Our mission is to guide you to a place of profound awareness, where emotions can be felt.
Together, let's illuminate the way to a brighter, more enlightened existence.
Modern Enlightenment, where your journey to inner peace begins.
Welcome to another episode of Modern Enlightenment. I am joined by Jayne Warrilow. Super excited to have her here. She is the founder of Sacred Changemakers, a community that supports coaches and conscious leaders, giving them resources and support in bringing more consciousness to the world. And just sitting in front of you, Jayne, right now, I'm just so delighted because you came to Ceremonia about a year and some change ago, and I've seen you as a change maker change so much. And so thank you for joining me here on Modern Enlightenment.
No, I'm looking forward to this conversation, Austin. Every time we have a conversation, I come away with so many insights. So I'm really excited to just talk to you today in more of a public way.
Beautiful. So I think where I'd like to start is if you could just map out for me, like who you were before your plant medicine experience with us, which was your first ceremony, right?
Yeah, it was. It was definitely my first group ceremony. And before then, don't get me wrong, I've been on a spiritual path all my life, but, and I would have thought coming to Ceremonia that I was pretty awake and aware and conscious. And I think to a certain extent I was. But what I realize now that I didn't know then was that I had an awful lot of knowledge in my head. But was I living it? Was I embodied in the knowledge? Or was it just like intellect? And I feel now, looking back on that, I was trapped in my intellect to a certain extent. And also because the world celebrates that, if you've got the answers. I've been a coach and consultant for 30 years now, working with leaders in the global space with many iconic brands. And so, the world kind of celebrated that, I had expertise in certain areas. And that has always included kind of the inner journey for leaders. And I've always been on a really quite a deep spiritual path myself. But the embodied living of what I knew, even being in my body, as we talked about a lot when I was there, I hadn't realized I was kind of cut off from the neck down. I disassociated completely with my body, and my body was really just something that could walk my head around to meetings and meet clients and just be in the world, really. That's kind of the function of my body. And my body was very painful because of some things I'd been through, some illnesses and injuries I'd had during life. So I was managing many things. And coming to Ceremonia, I kind of do think of things of like before Ceremonia and after Ceremonia. And it's kind of put me firmly on a very purpose-driven path now. Well, it is to the extent that I now own my expertise, and I am not willing to invest in things that are not what matters most to me. I think that's probably a good way of putting it. Yeah.
Wow. There's so much I want to dig into right now. First, I was on your podcast a few months ago, and we kind of visited your additional, ceremonial and natural medicine experiences afterwards. And now hearing you share about the disconnect between your body and your intellect, I remember you had Sacred Changemakers before coming to Ceremony,
Yeah.
and you were already coaching high level founders
Mhm.
and entrepreneurs that are
Yes.
making 7, 8 figures. And in fact, you brought a cohort of your clients in the same retreat that you came to. And so what strikes me is you've already been following this spiritual path and, in fact, teaching the spiritual path
Yes.
to founders and entrepreneurs before coming here. And then your discovery of that disconnect, I mean, seems all the more, I think the word that's coming to me is like surprising and potent.
Mhm.
Does that resonate with you?
It does, because I now see things like expertise, which I thought was my like superpower, if you like, in the world. I now see that as actually my shadow, because that's the ego driven side of what I do. And now I'm in flow. Now I'm listening more than I'm taking a stand, if you like. I'm listening deeply to my life. I trust my life in a way I didn't before. I trust my path, and one of the things we learn at ceremony is the way knows the way. Well, when I first heard that ceremony, I was like, what? Right? What's that? Like the way knows the way. But now I know that at a cellular level, what that means. And what that means to me now is more listening, not just to other people and things. I mean, that's always been in my wheelhouse, but listening to my life, noticing the synergistic events, noticing where I'm being pulled, what the internal impulse is drawing me towards, what the callings are in life, what wants expression through me, not just what Jayne wants to say, but what is it that, say, in this energy field between you and I right now, what is it that wants to emerge into the world through me? Because, of course, that's consciousness just knowing itself through my expression.
Mm,
So there's a very different relationship with life now that I think I had glimpses of before,
mm.
but now it feels integrated in a way it didn't before. Yeah.
So you mentioned this disconnect between your mind and your body. And I'm
Yeah.
curious, what does that feeling feel like? I'm hearing this knowing, I'm hearing this gnosis of the way knows the way, aka trust in life, trust in the universe. And I'm hearing that you feel this integrated inside of you and life flowing through you. I mean, I'm
Mm.
kind of parsing your words here. And in this moment, like I'm having tingles shooting through my body because I'm like, yeah, this I vibe with this. This is something that I feel as well. But I'm curious how that feeling lives inside of you. How would you describe that?
I think before I describe it, I just want to say for anybody listening, I had no idea of this before I came. That's the first thing I want to say. The second thing that I want to say is how it feels. I think I can probably say it best with some feedback I got from a client. And a client said to me, when you speak now, I don't just hear you, I feel you. So there's something about trying to describe this in language, I feel limits it in some way, because there's an energy, a texture to this that's almost inexplicable. If I describe it as knowing, it sounds like those bumper stickers that you put on cars, right, about spirituality. But I know things at a deeper level now. I trust my intuition. In fact, I follow it most of the time, nearly all the time now. But I suppose in a way it's like the hollow bone of healing, meaning that I see myself as not just a channel, but an integrated channel. So prior to Ceremonia, so I'm also a psychic and a channel for spirit. And prior to this, I would completely lose Jayne in the relationship with spirit. So Jayne didn't exist. I was just like to say the hollow bone. It would just come through. Now there's me in that relationship, in that dialogue. I am bringing I don't know how you describe it, my perspective, I guess. And I'm integrating with what I'm also getting from spirit or soul. I'm fully aware of when I'm in my higher self or whether I'm in the lower levels of consciousness. I feel it, I hear it, I see it, I sense it. I have the tools to move back to a place that feels more responsive and resilient. Yeah, it's like a felt, lived, visceral sense of the world, and not just living in the matrix and playing the game that we're all taught to play. Like before, I was very aware of things like, as a woman, we're very often socialized into people pleasing. I
Mm,
notice when I drop back there now and I'm coming out of that, it's not that I don't care anymore. It's more that I feel I have more value in a space so I can stand my ground. And not that I didn't before, I did, but I did it from a place that wasn't as deep as this. So I don't have to shout anymore. I can be very quiet and
mm.
gentle and firm about, whatever it is that I'm either contradicting or conflicting with somebody about. If I have a different perspective, that's okay. And it's okay for them to have a different perspective. I don't need people to like me or agree with me anymore. I know what I'm here for, or in any situation. And I'm very willing to kind of bring myself forward, I think, in a way that maybe I didn't quite before. I think before it was more, I felt like I had to step up and speak up. And in fact, many clients have brought me in for these reasons. Like they've said, oh, we've got to tell our team or our organization some bad news. So it sounds better with a female and a British accent. So can you come and do it, Jayne? And I would come and do it. But now I'd be, well, tell me a bit more about it. Like that's not a good enough reason for me to come in. So what is it that you're negating? Like, so I see myself as facilitating people through their stuff a lot more in situations where perhaps I would have let it go before. Now I'm like, I know what my purpose is in life. I know what I want my legacy to be. And it's inevitable. It doesn't matter whether I like it or not. This is where I'm headed. This is my service, my contribution, and I'm bringing it.
Something I'm really loving being with you right now, Jane, is like, I feel like if we transcribe this audio and just
Yeah.
analyze the number of times where I heard you say, I know,
Yeah, I do.
and it just, I'm really
Yeah.
struck by that because so many people come to us because they don't know. They don't know what to do next. They don't know what to do about the relationship. They don't know what to do about their health. And that the way that we often walk through life when we don't know, but we are afraid of not knowing is through force, which can be anger, which can be fear, which can be, pushing people or sacrificing our own needs and boundaries. And what I'm hearing is from you is like in this sense of knowing, you are taking stands for yourself, but not in a way where you're pushing people away, that
No.
you're able to just hold yourself in what, Lao Tzu, the Tao Te Ching, would call silent power.
Yeah, and there's a gentleness now. Because remember, I've worked in global spaces for it's coming up to 30 years now. And very often I've been in very male dominated environments. And for me, there was a lot of having to prove myself. I learned very early on I had to be, at least 3 times as good as the men around me just to be heard, for example. So there was a lot of shoulds in my space in a way. And what's interesting, you saying about why people come to Ceremonia, that's not at all why I came. I thought I was fine, right? I came just because I was curious about psychedelics, thought I'd bring some clients, it would be great, And of course, I didn't get what I wanted, I got what I needed. And there were some inherent challenges there, but the upside of that was beyond anything I could have imagined. Because just take little things. You'll remember I could not ask for help. I needed help. And yet I just wasn't in my wheelhouse. I was so fiercely independent, always have been. And now I know that I don't have a full deck of cards. I am inviting people in so many different ways in my life to help and support and collaborate and co-create. And of course, then everything gets accelerated, right? So just these little things that I wouldn't have even thought was a thing before have just kind of landed and grounded and rooted me in a way that I can't describe it. I feel powerful, but like you say, in a very quiet presence. I don't need to prove anything to anyone kind of way. It's weird. And when I speak now on stage, I don't get scared like I used to. I used to be like literally shaking, and now I just walk out and speak. I don't know how to describe it. It's almost like when I came to Ceremonia, I had a backpack full of stones, right? And it was heavy, and I didn't even know I was carrying the thing. I didn't even know it was there. And then in Ceremonia, I realized it was there and had to start unpacking it. And that didn't just happen at the retreat with you guys. It continued and is still continuing, I think, now. But now the backpack's much lighter. And yeah, I still find things, but I know now how to kind of deal with it and how to let it go. I think my word at Ceremonia was surrender. It's
Mm,
still my word today. It's surrender. And I feel that's where the magic of life kind of steps forward to meet me. Is that's what I've noticed. Is before that I wouldn't have said I was pushing, but I think there was quite a bit of pushing from some feeling not quite good enough on the inside. Anybody who knows me will be shocked when they hear me say that, because that's not what I portrayed at all. But
right.
now it feels real. I know my value and I am not afraid to speak it. And I know that, there's so much in this life to experience. And the relational field is something that has really come to the fore for me since being at Ceremonia. Yeah. Yeah. It's quite something.
I'm noticing my mind like really want to pick at so many different threads. And one of the things I just heard you say is I can't even describe it, right?
Yeah.
And part of that I think is coming from like the challenge of finding words to describe this. And yet as your clients observed, it's not so much the listening, it's the feeling. Like that
Yeah.
even if you said no words at all, that there would be an evident shift in how people perceive you, which is a shift in you and how
Yeah.
you are yourself, or more of yourself, you could say, right?
Mm.
But I want to challenge you actually on something.
Yeah.
I'd like to just maybe pull out two distinct Janes, right? A Jane before even embarking on your own consciousness path, long before Ceremonia, before you created Sacred Changemakers, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know the details of your background, but I'm imagining Jane, high powered executive in some way, shape, or form in a male dominated, you know,
Mm.
business culture. I imagine you are actually coaching these kind of people now, right? Or have for a long period of time. So you as, let's call it Jane, I don't know what point oh, let's call it 3.0, speaking to Jane 1.0, I'm just making numbers up. How would you communicate to that Jane? Because there is this kind of challenge in that in the path of service that you are very much on and I'm on, that I believe we get to meet people where they're at, right?
Yeah.
It's why I begin with neuroscience and psychology. I don't go super woo woo, right off the bat, right? And I'm curious how, with you still have your extraordinary intellect,
Mm.
and now it's integrated with your gnosis that you feel in your
Mhm.
body, that you feel spiritually. And so, how would Jane 3.0 like communicate to Jane 1.0 right now? Maybe if you two met and in the line getting a coffee, and that Jane 1.0 commented on bright you feel to her. Like, how would you communicate your experience and maybe your advice to that past version of you?
I think that younger Jane would have benefited from knowing that life is lived within. It's not out there, right? It's in here. And that we all live in very different worlds. So understanding that at a visceral level and knowing that for that Jane, that 1.0 Jane, like you're on a path, you've got a lifetime to evolve. And so don't fool yourself into thinking you know everything now. You don't have to have all the answers. How could you possibly have all the answers when you're in your mid 20s? I don't even think I'll get all the answers by the time I'm in my hopefully mid 80s, right? So this is a process, it's a path, it's a journey. And I think the other thing that I would say to that, Jane, is that life is here for you. Even the challenges, and you're going to meet some really big ones around health and different things that really, bring you to your knees. And this too will pass, right? And the real work, the real purpose, I think, is building a relationship with yourself, a home on the inside, a sanctuary for your soul. Because if you haven't got that and you invest in other people or places or things and you place your home in other people and then they leave or they reject you or it doesn't go as you expected, that relationship, whatever, then they take you with them when they go. So this relationship with yourself is foundational for everything. And it's foundational with life. And you're so much more than you think you are. So much more. And that, you've an incredible journey ahead of you. So, yeah, just know you're on your path. Even when it feels like you're not, and you've been knocked off and you're on your knees, you're on your path because everything's for you. There's learning in everybody that you meet and in every circumstance you find yourself within. And to me, it's all about consciousness. It's all about developing and elevating your consciousness through your development so that you can be something that I call full spectrum with your consciousness. So you can move around the levels. You can be in lower consciousness. You can be in higher consciousness. You can be in the middle. You can be in the intellect. You can be in the emotional. You can be in all of them, but you can meet people where they are. Because this life, for me anyway, it's not about you. You might think it is. It might feel like it is, but it's not. It's about the contribution that you bring to the whole. So,
Wow. Some things I'm hearing is like, it's okay to not know.
yeah. Well, how could you? I mean, it's an illusion that we fabricate for ourselves, this clarity of knowing. I think clarity is massively overrated, especially in the business, especially today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, living from the inside out, there's life is happening for you, not to you. And when you're in the suck, just know that it's still part of the journey, right?
Yeah.
You haven't fallen off the wagon. It's part of it. And I'm curious if for a moment you could just entertain me and the audience. How do you think Jayne 1.0 would respond?
Oh my gosh. I don't know is the honest answer because it depends where 1.0 was in my life. But even in my 20s, I was so wounded from a very difficult childhood that I was still trying to make sense of the world, really. I had no idea of my own personal power. I had no idea of my potential in the world. And so I think that's why I think one of the reasons why I got into a spiritual path really young. And a lot of it I kind of went along with, and it didn't make complete sense to me, really, but I just knew it was a good place for my soul to be. It was a nice playground to be in that was very different to business. I never thought the worlds would meet, but they did. And so I think, like most young people, I was still young enough to think I knew everything. And now I feel, God, I hardly know anything. There's so much out there to know. And I think the world would be a better place if we could all just acknowledge that. We're filled in the modern world with experts. Most people are not experts. Even doctors, they know less than they think. We've all walked through what I see now as very narrow doors of knowledge, and we try and fit the world to our own paradigms. When really, now I'm walking through multiple doors and noticing the magic within so many of them. Yeah. Multiple perspectives feels just normal now, whereas it was a little bit more like that, I think, then. So maybe I'd have listened and maybe not. I don't know.
Yeah, it seems like, I share often on this podcast this belief that I have that the more conscious we become, the more complexity we can hold, right?
Yeah.
And it seems like what you're saying is that Jayne 1.0, through her wounding, was only able to hold the world in a very narrow view that was like contorted to maximize the perception of control, right?
Absolutely.
And using the external to validate, and with the message of like, you don't need that. It's okay. Go internal. It could just be like so different from Jayne 1.0's worldview that it could have been an outright rejection of this concept.
Right. I think so. Because, they say that when you're ready, the teacher appears. Like I've read some spiritual texts that I read in my 20s. I've read them again recently. They're so different now. I see and hear so many different threads running through it that I don't think I was even aware of then, because I just wasn't open to that level of wisdom. I was still searching for knowledge. I was in the seeking stage, the lower levels of consciousness, like, who am I? Where do I belong? Where's my place? What's my work? What's my purpose? Like, what am I doing? I just know I've got to get away from my childhood. Like, that was kind of the impetus. And so for me, it was through education and training. And that's what got me my ticket out of my birthplace in a way. And now it's just like, yeah, it just is. It sounds so twee when I say it. I could almost like punch myself in the face when I say it because it sounds so, like I've heard people say this before, but when you live it, when you embody it, when you experience it, It's really different. It's not gaslighting in any way. It's just like, yeah, that's my experience now.
Yeah. There's this Buddhist teacher I followed named Joseph Goldstein, came up with Ram
Mm,
Dass and other Alan Watts,
yeah,
etc. And Joseph shares that one of the challenges of the path of consciousness is to arrive at a place where you know that suffering is not bad, and yet you can see other people suffering and hold deep compassion for them. And there is that interesting duality because you can observe somebody in pain and be like, this is their journey. This may serve them. And you know what these Eastern spiritual traditions say is that suffering is there to guide people to a place of awakening. Because
right.
for many people, we have to hit rock bottom in order to say, damn, I've had enough. I'm going to go make a change. Right.
Yeah, yeah,
So
I
I'm,
agree.
so I'm curious now, let's bring in Jayne 2.0. Okay. And I would say, I know of Jayne 2.0 as the person that I met on Zoom calls before you came to Ceremonia. And I'm sure Jayne 2.0 started long before then. But if you're open to sharing, I remember that Jayne 2.0 had a really big health issue. I'm curious, first of all, what was Jayne 2.0 going through with her health? And then what would Jayne 3.0 say to Jayne 2.0 now?
Right. So Jane 2.0 was catalyzed with a massive medical injury, giving birth to my son, Jacob. And he's now 22. And that medical injury, I mean, I won't go into it all, but it was bladder, kidneys, and spinal cord. Incredibly painful, misdiagnosed for a year. So by the time the doctors gave me a diagnosis, I had to have multiple surgeries. Nothing worked. Ended up with a terminal diagnosis. They were going to take my bladder out and put a modulator in my spine.
Wow.
I'd been bedridden for 4 years on morphine and so many opiates. I mean, I won't go through the list, but it included fentanyl,
Oh my
right?
God.
So a lot of stuff. I was not in my life. And I was kind of written off by the medical profession, kind of told to go home and die, really, make the most of the time you've got with your kids, because they thought I was going to die by 2011 at the latest. So that was a
Latest.
massive awakening for me, because what actually happened in my world as I started to heal, I put together an alternative medicine team, including an Oriental doctor that helped to bring me back to life. And it was also catalyzed the move to America, because you don't live in a damp, wet climate if you have the issues that I have, according to Oriental medicine. So I was dealing with a lot. And I was also fiercely independent, as I've already shared, and wasn't going to lose my career. So going back to work after was really interesting, because I was already a spiritual healer and an energy healer. And at some level, that actually was an embodiment for me, because as I went back to walking into a corporate headquarters in Hammersmith in London to an old client who didn't know what had happened to me, I was walking across an open plan office to get to his corner office to coach him. And it was like walking through the living dead. I knew I had to bring my worlds together. And that was when my body of work on energy and resonance and the internal work on leadership really began, and mapping the levels of consciousness. But remember, it was at an intellectual level, which I didn't realize at the time. So I knew a lot, and I started to bring things in. And, it was challenging because the world wasn't ready for it back in early 2000s. But here I was doing this work. And so this is Jayne 2.0. And she's still in the matrix, let's put it that way. I'm still in modern world. I'm still very socialized into what I should be doing in certain situations and not. And, I'm female and I'm showing up in boardrooms, and I'm getting some of the disdain that I've always had from males. Like, what can I learn from a young blonde woman? Right? Seriously. And so dealing with all of that and realizing that that's being inspired by some quotes like the Rumi quote, which is one of my favorites. Out beyond the field of right and wrong, there is a field. I'll meet you there. So I'm touting these spiritual things and helping facilitate people through their own journeys and doing very well. I mean, incredible transformations I was sparking. But what I don't think I realized was the cost of all of that, the stress, the backpack with the rocks that was beginning to come up on me. Because the other thing I haven't told you was just before that, like, I'd been a single parent with two young daughters when I started my first business. And it was a bit like riding a wild elephant. Like, we were very successful very quickly, got to multi-million dollars consultancy, and it was just, life was crazy, right? And so actually when I had that injury, I was pretty burnt out and I didn't realize it. And I was giving everything. Like my clients would say to me, jump, Jayne. And I'd be like, how high? How high? I'll jump. Right. And so everything was externally referenced. Like, am I doing well? Oh, I'm making a lot of money. I must be doing well. Right. So that kind of, like, people like me, people are transforming. It's going really well. Oh, great. But not a lot going on really on the inside, not much in terms of me knowing where I am and what I'm doing and why even. For me, it was just financial stability. I've got to be okay with my kids, right? Because my ex was not paying anything to support us. So it was all down to me. So you can see I was shaped through these survival instincts. So 3.0 Jayne talking to 2.0 Jayne would be a lot more about take a breath, slow down, pause, be a bit more mindful about your responses. Don't just react all the time. Stop trying to prove yourself. Like, nobody cares what color jacket you've got on. Just go do your work, right? But you see, as women, we're very conditioned into these ways of showing up in professional life. I learned the masculine way of doing business. That's who I was in 2.0. I was successful. I was an expert. I had the answers. If you needed them, I could give them to you. I could facilitate you finding your own as well. But yeah, I was really good at what I did. And so it's just a little bit like, just take the foot off the accelerator a bit. Have a life as well as a business. Like, what is this all about for you? Like, Jayne, what matters most? And are you living that? And are you supporting it? Because my daughter, at the age of 3 at nursery, was asked to draw a picture of her family at home. And at that time, I was a single mom running my own business that was doing really well, but it meant I was leaving at 5 in the morning and getting back at 8 at night. She didn't even draw me in the house. She drew me in a car. She drew herself and her baby sister in the house. And that should have been a wake-up call for me. But I didn't know how else to be in the world. I was trying to survive. So I was on a track that was not of my own making, but I was doing what I thought I should do for them. Wow. So yeah, it was stop losing yourself in relationship with everyone else, your clients, your friends, like your daughters. Yeah. Claim your own ground. Take up a bit more space in the world. It's okay.
When I share alumni, we now have more than 200 alumni that have come through. And you're one of the standouts that I share the story of, because your story of physical healing was tremendous.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
What my recollection was that out of the 3 ceremonies in our Awaken journey, 2 of them you were really suffering through, the first 2. And in the third, something happened. And I'm curious if you could just recount that a little bit, because my story that I have is that so much of what you're sharing about how 2.0 became 3.0 happened there in what you provided yourself to those, like, injured parts of you, both physically, mentally, and spiritually. So you could share that. And if that's something that you would share to 2.0.
I don't know that she would have been ready. I believe that, things come along at the right time. But for me, Journey 1 and Journey 2 was horrific in some ways. It was, and partly 1, because I didn't expect it, and 2, because I didn't know what was going on, and 3, because I was resisting and I had no idea I was resisting, and I didn't know what I was resisting. And the medicine took me into my body, and my body was a really painful place to be. So I was confronted with the reality of my physical existence. I denied it for 22 years. I've been in chronic pain. And the story I tell myself now is that we can repattern pain, and I wouldn't profess to know everything about that, but I know it's got something to do with levels of consciousness and tapping in and tuning in to things. So one of the processes I went through internally myself on Journey 2 was to awaken to the pain and let it be. The next step was to accept it. So I needed to accept that this was my reality and this was my body. And then to move into attuning more to I guess I'd call it essence. I don't know that I would have called it soul then, but I see it now as a different level of Jayne's reality. So I was attuning to a different field to, oh, this is really painful and I'm an invalid and I'm disabled and I'm going to die, which was always my biggest fear. So I was confronted with that fear. And what's weird is if you're listening to this, I was also okay at the same time. I knew I was okay and this was going on at the same time.
Yeah.
And I didn't understand it because intellectually I wanted to understand it. And to be fair, that's how I came out of Ceremonia. I still wanted to intellectually understand it. And what shifted was the field in the room. My biggest fear coming to Ceremonia, I don't know if you remember, was me taking medicine in the same space as my clients and other people that I
Oh,
knew.
wow.
Right. And that was my biggest fear, was that I was going to be sick or do something that was awful. So, of course, I looked like a complete wreck for most of the retreat. And then it was day 2 where the group decided I needed healing, and you all did hands-on healing for me. I have never been supported in that way before in my life. It was like there was a matrix of relationships of people, some of them I didn't know very well at all, that were willing to support me through what I was going through. And that to me was just, I had no information on this. It was like, what? And then sitting with that, integrating that, getting ready for journey 3 was the full on surrender for me. I mean, that had been my word from day 1, but I obviously had to learn it. And so then in ceremony 3, I remember being in dialogue with my internal self and saying, and even with the medicine, and saying, it's okay. I can vomit if you need me to vomit. That's all right. I can vomit. It's okay. I'm not going to resist it anymore. But show me what you need me to know. Like, what is this? And I started dialoguing internally in a way that I hadn't done on the previous ceremonies. And what I still felt nauseous, but I also felt okay with whatever was going to happen. And of course, then I didn't vomit. And then, of course, I was taken on something of a journey through my past. And what that did was just release some of the trauma that was still there, gave me multiple perspectives on things that I'd maybe only had that narrow door on before, and realized without a doubt that everything was for my greater good if I could just listen and be with. So that was my integration process. And it didn't come from outside. It didn't come, I mean, it was catalyzed by you and the other people in the group. But that field that we created in Journey 8, as you know, continues to this day. We're all still really good friends and we meet regularly because it's an incredible, supportive, non-judgmental field that it felt like home, Austin. It just felt like coming home. It felt like sanctuary. That's what it felt like. And it continues to this day, because even though we all live in different places, we're still in the field together. We know that. And we're continuing the support for each other. And I've never had that in my life, ever. And now I have. So grateful.
I feel like I'm getting so much in this conversation right now because, we're working on communicating what the hell is ceremonia and why does it work the way that it does and how is it working, what we perceive to be and now studying, researching to be the so much better than other plant medicine experiences. And what we keep coming back to is connection. And then when I connect the dots in this conversation, because in the very beginning, before you started talking from 3.0 to 1.0, now 3.0 to 2.0, what I heard you say was there's nothing left to prove. You don't have to prove yourself anymore. You feel a clarity and a firmness in that clarity of who you are internally, right? And then looking at 1.0, it was like, this is a woman that needs to work 3 times as hard to live in a man's world. And I remember you saying 3.0 to 1.0, it doesn't matter the color of what you're wearing, but to 1.0 that mattered, right? And all of that was about like, how do I show up to the outside? Because the outside is not safe, right?
Right.
And then all of a sudden, through the suffering and being, as you said, like a disheveled mess, but feeling the support and safety from all these people that you were actually afraid of showing up as a
Yeah.
mess too? Because they're clients, of course. They pay you money. You might be like, man, if I show up as a mess and I'm supposed to be supporting them spiritually, how are they gonna, why would they ever continue to pay me? And then when you received that love and safety, you're
Mm.
able to just
Yeah.
and go inwards. Wow. I mean, it feels clear as day, like
Yeah.
connection.
It is. It's absolutely true because I told you my work on resonance, which is all about connection, is started back in the early 2000s. But now I've pulled this up. This is my purpose in life now,
Mm.
is to basically to bring to the world resonance. And what does that mean? It really means to help other people to resonate with themselves, each other, and all living things. That's the relational field. And yeah, we can try and connect, but are we resonating? Because to me, connection can be a push. It can be, I'm trying to figure this out, right? Or it can be, no, I'm just going to go with the energy flow here. I'm going to go with the charge. I'm just going to see what it is that wants to kind of emerge. So there's an emergence here. So these are higher level orders of things now, which I think comes from the embodiment. Because in that space, when I felt that level of relationship and love and support that I'd never felt before in my life, that was, I don't even know that I have words for it. That healed me in a way that nothing else could. And then, of course, you start to realize that everything I was afraid of was just an illusion. It's just an illusion. I don't need to get anywhere now because I'm here. I'm just here, right?
Yeah.
And yes, I'm still on a journey, but yeah, it's like, it's just a really different texture to life. And it's love. I mean, again, bumper sticker warning. It's love instead of fear. It's like they can't exist in the same breath. And I can't remember who said that, but somebody did. And also the Ram Dass quote, we're all just walking each other home. I don't think it gets more complicated than that, really. And so if I can accept, I think I was very good at giving before. Now I can give and I can receive. And I think I wasn't so good at receiving before. Energetic exchange feels really alive now in my life.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
So now we've time traveled to 1.0, 2.0, we're at 3.0 now. And I'm
Yeah.
curious, what's your edge now? The edge of your comfort zone. Like where is there
Mhm.
still the exploration, the stickiness? Like
I know exactly what it is. And it's in a professional setting, is owning the fact that I'm psychic and that I channel because I still value my intellect and my master's degrees and all that. And yet over here, there's a different texture now to my knowing. And my clients know it. Don't get me wrong. I work very often intuitively with them, but to come out publicly with this feels very edgy.
mm,
And it's exactly where I'm going. So now I'm like, ooh, there's an edge. Let's go. Right. Whereas before I was a bit like, oh, no, I want to back away from the edge because I don't want to stop at, as you call it, 3.0. I want to keep going. Like, and it's almost like my rate of change, and I don't know whether we call it involution or evolution, but it's kind of accelerating, but not in a way that feels rushed or anything. It's just quite natural and in flow. And I'm not afraid of the edges. In fact, I welcome them now. I'm like,
mm,
oh, yeah, give me an edge. Let's go.
mm,
Right. Which catalyzed me going to Ecuador and living with the indigenous, like different nations for a number of weeks last October. I would never have done that. I
right.
don't even go camp. And there I was in the middle of the Amazon rainforest without a tent. So there's so many journeys and experiences now I'm ready to have because everything is just, I don't want to say magical, but it kind of feels that way. And I also realize the invisible is running the show. All the subconscious, all the stuff that we don't necessarily speak about, that's what's impacting our reality, not the things that are tangible and that we can see. So much more than a physical reality, this multidimensional. And
Mm,
so tapping into those and using the whole feels normal now.
mm.
Yeah. I'm getting weirder by the minute.
It's funny you label it as that because like I wrote a blog where I think it was last year where I said I'm on Austin 6.0 and each version was mapped by a significant plant medicine experience. The last one was with the bone dove,
Right.
right? And that's not necessarily for everybody, but when I look at Austin 1.0, I think to myself, if that Austin continued on the path he was going, he would have made a bunch of money, had a lot of houses and a lot of time, et cetera, right? And Austin 1.0 believed that to be what would make Austin happy,
Right.
right? And then when, I'm on other people's podcasts and they ask me about my experiences, I often say to them, if I told Austin 1.0 how much joy and purpose and love and peace and gratitude I feel now, that Austin wouldn't even have a reference point, wouldn't even be able to believe me,
Yeah.
right? And I imagine the same for you. Like if Jayne
Absolutely.
1.0 continued on her path, she would
Mhm.
have been a high
Oh, yeah.
powered executive with a ton
Yep.
of money, a lot of influence, maybe even dead.
Yes. I think that's true. I wouldn't be here.
And one of my dearest friends who I met through plant medicine, he's a billionaire. And he started his path because he had a heart attack in his office. And I think about
Right.
that, you know, it's hard to communicate what we
Yeah.
feel because the values are so different than the values of often the people listening and receiving. And yet, I believe the path of service is to actually make this accessible, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And so as you look forward to Jayne 4.0 and all the other iterations that are going to come, where are you going? Where do you think
Mm.
you're going?
I don't know, and I don't care because wherever I'm going, it's where I'm meant to be. So for me, in the moment, is I'm learning to let go of some of the things I knew in business, for example, like,
Mm,
do a strategic plan, work the plan. Like, no, now I follow the impulse. Like, what do I love? My business is a playground now. What do I love to do?
mm,
And so I don't know where I'm going, and I don't want to know because, in a way, how could I? Because just by knowing is a closed energetic system. So for me, once you know, you don't need to know anything else. You already know. I don't want to be that. I want to be an open, in flow, more like a wave than a particle. I want to flow wherever life wants me to go because I trust my life now in a way I didn't before. So, this idea of knowing, I really mean it when I say, I don't want to know
mhm,
because it's just an illusion. Knowing is an illusion, right?
yeah.
And through my being, I will attract. They say it's a mirror. Whatever's going on inside is going on outside. Well, yeah, there'll be challenges. There'll be the hero's journey, like there is for all of us. I'll keep looping around that, I'm sure. And there'll also be a lot more slowing down, a lot more simplicity, a lot more
Mm,
space for me in this life and not just for everybody else. So I can tell you that. But where I'm going is exactly where I'm meant to be. Yeah.
beautiful. Part of me wants to just like conclude on that soundbite, but I think it's also important to actually ask, are you bankrupt?
No,
No.
absolutely not.
Are you
No,
homeless? No, you're like thriving.
absolutely not. No, and that's the interesting thing that has really challenged me because I think if you'd have asked 2.0 Jane, she'd have said, "Oh, you can't do that. You've got to do it this way."
Right.
Oh, no, 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 no. No. One of the things I'm learning is that very few of us, particularly in the business space, are present and enjoying what we're doing. So when other people come across me and I show up with this excitement, these insights, this inspiration, this joy for what I do, people say the passion is palpable. They don't meet many people where that's the case. It's like I'm pulling people into my orbit
Hmm.
because of the resonance that's
Yeah.
there. So, absolutely, what we're taught about, profit, not for profit, you can't make an impact and be profitable. Bullshit, right?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
the way you do it. Everything else is an illusion. You do you.
Yeah, I love that. And I wanted to make a point to ask that because I think
Yeah.
that's often one of the questions that people have. They're like, man, if I go pursue a spiritual path, if I find myself, I have a friend, I won't name names, but very successful. And on Instagram, he's driving a Lamborghini around and sharing, you know, sign up for this software that I just developed and you can be like me is effectively the message. And I remember sharing with him about Ceremonia and he's like, you know, I'm going to make $100 million first and then come because I'm afraid that if I come, I won't be able to make that comfortable life afterwards. I just nodded and smiled and said, great, see you soon. And that's
Oh,
the funny thing is there's an assumption in there,
there
right?
is.
That, hey, if I sacrifice 4 years of my life to make $100 million, right? guessing what is in his mind, that's a worthwhile sacrifice to set myself up and my children for life and for their lives. And then I can do my healing afterwards. But it just doesn't work that way.
Yeah. I mean, literally 67 is the age of retirement. You work until you're 67 and then you can go travel the world and find your hobbies and do all that. But what if you don't make it to 67? I mean, you've got to live now. It's not about the destination, it's about the journey. But this is what I stand for at Sacred Changemakers. We have all these polarities in the world that we believe because it's what we've set up for the modern world. But they're just polarities. And the thing about polarities is we think we have to choose one or the other. We don't. We have to learn how to manage and integrate for both. And that's what my work is all about now, because I'm realizing we have so many of these polarities. And now is the time of integration because business, for example, leaders, they can be a force for good. They can have great lives and follow their passion. And they can bake all that into their leadership and their business. And then their clients and their customers will feel it. They'll not just see the marketing, they'll be embodying it. And I can't tell you the amount of organizations I've been into where they have amazing marketing. And then you walk in the door and everybody hates going to work there because it's a marketing message. It's not an embodied culture. And that goes for individuals as well as organizations. Like, are you aligned? Are you living into what matters most to you? Because if you're not, there'll be a cost. And I've worked with so many of the people like your friends, and they're not happy. They've got the $100 million. In some cases, they're the billionaires as well. I've worked with a few of those as well. And does money make them happy? No, in actual fact, I'd say they have more fear than people I've worked with who have nothing. More fear. They're so scared of losing what they think they've got because to them, it's all about having. Well, no, you don't have. You don't do so you can have or do so you can be. Being comes first. If you do the being first, then that infuses the doing and then you'll end up with the having. To me, that's the right way around, not the other way.
Beautiful. Well, thank you, Jayne. This has been such a wonderful conversation and so delighted to visit Jayne 1.0, 2.0 and sit here in front of 3.0. Jayne, who went from high-powered executive and single mom to psychic coach and sacred changemaker and podcast host. And how can people find you if they want to find out more about you and your path?
Certainly. Well, I'm on all the social media networks and my professional home is at sacredchangemakers.com. So come and have a look at what we're up to in the world because it's really exciting.
Thank you so much for joining me. Till next time.
Yeah, thank you, Austin.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Modern Enlightenment. If you enjoyed today's conversation, be sure to check out our website, subscribe to our online community, and check out our social media links in the show notes for more resources and updates.
And don't forget to subscribe to our podcast to stay connected with our upcoming episodes, where we continue to explore the intersection of modern science and spiritual wisdom. Until next time, stay curious, stay inspired, and keep shining your light.